kind of name that I could refer to, or do I have to stick with that?
Just stick with Anarchy for now. I'm just stick with Anarchy. It's what I prefer.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Well then, you have expressed some concern over my political ideas, I guess. My government type, which I would be most interested in creating. Was very interesting to listen to your arguments. I'm gonna have to say that. You are so far my most serious opponent on here.
Yeah, Reese is kind of yeah, I'm not insulting Reese in any way. I'm just gonna say like not as serious as us considering, not putting anything on the like for us it's like, you're at a gambling match and you're putting stuff on the table and Reese is just sitting there twiddling the thumbs, not knowing how to play the cards right.
Yes, the problem with Reese. I feel it's kind of silly that anyone would even see Reese as an opponent, considering that Reese hasn't really played anything yet.
Do not count out Reese. Don't count Reese out yet, though. Still makes a qualifying opponent. But I do want to say that what I've said in a lot of those voice messages, I have to say, like, maybe I took it a bit too far. Maybe I took it a bit too far. Shouldn't have said what I said, or at least some of it. But I do want to express the concern that I feel is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I really can't agree with your point of view on my type of mixing with coalitions. Mixing up different parties to create bigger ones is a vital part in politics, for me at least. You definitely didn't seem too happy about that. But I don't know what your problem is there, as they don't really create super parties as you would have expressed it. They create good mixtures of different people and different parties who can all work towards a better goal for a greater society. Please.
I understand I understand what the argument is. I get what you mean. The reason why I described it as super party is that it becomes more of a massive grouping of people who agree with a specific side of things. And of course, that's not bad in of itself. However, when you have a more massive amount of people believing in one thing, eventually, it's kind of like how gravity works. Think about it like this. There's one. Tell me, what planet has more gravity, Jupiter or Earth?
I believe that is Jupiter.
Yes, by a lot. And do you know why?
Because it has more mass. Mass attraction, gravity. Quite simple.
Mass. But we also have to bring in size to the equation because mass can bring it. Because mass does have to do with size and such. Now, size doesn't always mean more
Doesn't
attractive force. It doesn't.
Well,
It doesn't
size doesn't
mean
have
that.
to mean that exactly. It's a bit misleading what you're trying to say here. Well, mass is size, sure, but mass doesn't equal size in that. A small black hole, which is but the size of just a book can have more mass than an entire planet.
I know,
Because
and
they
that's
can.
why I was saying like it's not exactly the same.
So your argument is that the big parties just attract more. and just become supermasses, like stars.
In a sense, somewhat like that. It's not exactly the same because analogies like that don't always have to equate to human emotion. But if you think about it, a lot of the time, people follow trends. That's what they tend to do. People follow trends. Those who don't get left out. Eventually, if a large enough party is formed, then multiple smaller parties are going to feel that their view is impossible to be heard, and so they're just going to try and fit themselves into the bigger party, and then they're all going to try and fit each other inside this bigger party until there's just one party left. That party holds all the power. That party holds all the authority. And now that doesn't mean that it's going to be corrupt, but it's much easier to be corrupted than, multiple different parties.
I understand where your concern comes from, but I have to argue that I believe it was Caesar who said that we don't have everlasting friends or enemies. We only have everlasting interest. Parties are groups of interest. Parties represent the interests of their members. And joining together parties so everyone, all the parties, can get their interests through is the best part of democracy. If we can have 2 or 3 parties come together to get a good majority, and then all of them can get their interests into the government body, then that would be a lot more preferable than 1 or 2 parties having all the power. Wouldn't you say so?
I see where your point comes from, and I do believe that your big answer for this to create coalitions so that eventually, parties come together is a pretty smart idea in order to reach a better form of democracy. It's just not what I personally am going to go after.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that the current form of democracy, which Ed has forced upon us, does definitely prefer parties and coalitions at that, because it's just all about getting votes and getting people who work with you into the government. So at the moment, at least, I believe that just forming big parties and coalitions will be the most preferable course of action to gain power within the government, to make actual changes later on. So if you want to achieve anything, then I would recommend to you that you try to look for members for your own party, or for potential coalition members as well. Just a recommendation, of course.
I understand. My ultimate mission when getting into office, if I succeed, which that's a big if, considering you're one of the best opponents I've got.
Indeed. I
My
do have quite an amount of people.
my biggest motivation is going to be destroying the current system that we know of currently, and by breaking it apart instead of more of joining it together. And now that might seem wrong, of course, at first. The thing is, the reason I feel like this system is wrong isn't because of the lack of freedom. It's the lack of diverse ideas, the lack of people willing to speak to each other intelligently to come up with a decision. You see, the two-party system is so messed up because it just dominates the entire system. No one can get a say in unless you're one of those parties. That's why I'm trying to be more of on the centrist side and break all of this down, have multiple parties speak out on what they believe in, and eventually people will come to terms with the idea that parties in the end are just not that great. We won't have parties, we'll just have a union. And people will agree or disagree.
Well, parties are unions. parties come together so everybody can get what they want from the government. Quite similar to union, in my opinion, in people coming together and just standing together under one banner, under one idea. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree with that, but I have to say that parties are simply seem like they're for more self-interest purposes rather than interest of the entire government or the entire country. That's the interest that I want to worry about, the entire country as a whole, rather than just one piece. I believe
See,
that everyone should be accounted for rather than just one at a time. We need everyone's interest. We need the entire country's interest. The very interest of citizens everywhere.
Um, I believe it was you who said that politics isn't about picking a good choice, but picking the worst bad. Correct? I believe that you
Yes,
said
that
that.
is true.
Well, a government is about people who are supported by the general population coming together to find the least bad options. Obviously, parties are a good way to achieve that, as they can represent specific ideas for problem solutions. For example, a more left-leaning party might want to get, the typical left things, more taxes from the rich to get more to the poor. Very, very, very standard stuff here. While more right parties might wish for less tax on the rich to support them and getting less social programs for the poor. Obviously, if you have parties, it's a lot easier to organize these groups together. A lot better than just picking random people to do that kind of thing. How would you imagine a party-less system to properly work without people eventually just coming together again and forming parties anyway? Because parties are just the basic human idea of how a system should function, right? I believe that it's very basic concept where we will eventually just come back to having parties anyway, even if we try our best to avoid them forming. Please.
An excellent idea, I have to add to you. The only issue with the partyless system that I'm trying to make is that in the end, you're probably right. Maybe parties will come back, but they'll be 100 times more diverse. There will be more spread out. It won't just be some big, lurking party looking over everything, but it'll be multiple ideas coming from multiple ones.
That's a good thing about my idea with coalitions. In a coalition, for example, us and the Mario Party, we work together, and we can get the interest of both of us. The Mario Party can get their chill Mario games out, and we can concern ourselves with our own ideas. We have a very diverse group of different people